Gaming monitors have come crashing down in price in the last year or so. Ever since OLED panels have gotten more popular, you've been able to get some very fast IPS panel at 1440p high refresh rate for very cheap. And that is the case for the monitor I have here today. Now this thing comes in at just over 200 bucks, and it's a 1440p 240Hz panel with very good colors, and it's the Titan Army P2510S. Now, up until a few years ago, to power a 1440p 240Hz monitor, you needed a very high-end PC, having to spend around 2,000 bucks to make it run. Well, today with a quarter of that price, we can make it run. And that's the build we have here today. So this is very similar to the Meta build I've done very recently, basically explaining how with around 500 bucks, you can build a Ryzen 7 7700 with an RTX 4060 gaming PC that's incredibly powerful. However, in that video, I was focusing on 1080p. It turns out a similar build is even better for 1440p. And now this is really the Meta budget build I recommend at the moment, because every single one of you guys can build a similar one for a very similar price if you follow my advice, because a lot of those components are available worldwide directly on AliExpress. So let's get straight into the build and the performance. Now, again, at the core of the build, there is the Ryzen 7 7700, which can be bought on AliExpress for just a little bit over 100 bucks. Now, this is a previous gen 8-core 16-threaded CPU, which can be overclocked and undervolted quite well to extract around 20% more performance, as I show on the videos on my channel. Now, you do need a motherboard though, and that's where it gets a little bit more expensive, usually, unless you buy it on AliExpress as well. And here we have one of the best choices for micro ATX. So this one is the Qingque B650M Snow Dream, and I will have a dedicated review on the channel, but it's basically a 100 bucks motherboard micro ATX from the same maker of the Night Devil. It's basically the same motherboard, it's just a bit bigger and quite a lot cooler, being fully white. And if you buy it together with the CPU, with coupons on AliExpress, you can throw in the RAM as well. And DDR5 has come down in price by a lot. You can now buy, even on Amazon, 32 gigabytes of name brand RAM. Here we have Patriot Type RAM at 6000 megahertz for under 100 bucks. I was able to get this kit for 70 bucks, brand new, for 32 gigabytes. Now, if you are making a big order on AliExpress and you are in one of those periods where you have coupons, by the way, I'm not sponsored in any way, I just use AliExpress for my business. So I'm telling you guys a few industry secrets, which are not really secrets, it's just taking advantage of the website. Basically, if you go ahead and make a bigger order, you can have with coupons around a 15% discount on the whole thing. So if you put together like CPU, motherboard, RAM and SSD, and you throw 15% off coupons with prices that are already under Amazon price to begin with, you're gonna be able to get something like this. That's the trick. But you can also just buy the RAM on Amazon, and if you're in a period with no coupons, you can be good either way. And of course, if you don't want to buy a Chinese B650, you can buy it on the used market locally. This one is brand new, but you can buy, for example, a gigabyte motherboard on the used market together with a CPU from someone that upgraded, and just tell them, listen, you can buy it on AliExpress for 250 bucks, CPU plus motherboard brand new. Would you take 200 for your used combo? And they may accept. You may be able to get even less of a price that we got here today and get the RAM thrown in as well. So that's the key. In the previous build, I went with a water cooler, because if you do put a bigger cooler, you can undervolt the system and make it run even better by capitalizing on PBO tuning. But if you want, you can also go with a stock cooler and keep the cost down, save another 20 to 30 bucks, which at this price range definitely are something. So that's what we've done here today. And now the first time I ran a Firestrike with this configuration, the CPU was overheating dramatically, but then I undervolted it, and as you can see by the second Firestrike, it basically has the same score, but it's now running a lot cooler, and we actually got an increase in the physics. The only difference is the GPU performed a bit worse due to benchmark variance, but basically stock cooler is plenty fine for a 7700. Now, for the SSD, I just bought something off of Amazon warehouse to keep the cost down. So I've got a Crucial P3, paid a nice 50 bucks for a 1 terabyte of Gen 3. Gen 3 is gonna be plenty fine for just gaming, of course, for productivity. Gen 4 is gonna be a big advantage, but you don't really need it. Now, onto the GPU, just a regular 4060, but this time I bought it used for 150 bucks as usual, but it was basically brand new. The guy even got me the receipt. He just bought it, and then he apparently got gifted like a 5070, so he gave away these old 460 for very little price. These deals are out there if you're willing to search for them. The case is just absolutely terrible, but it's one of those basically Chinese rebranded cases which you find on Amazon. They're gonna have a different name depending on where you live. This one I think is called Musetex in Italy, where I'm from, but you can buy it, like for example, if you are in the US, it's gonna be called something completely different, but you can still buy one of those. It's basically a 50 to 60 bucks case with 6 included ARGB fans, and I took one off the top, mounted it on the back, and this is how it's looking. It's looking nice. The fans are not doing much at all, but it's a very low power consumption PC, so you don't need them to do much. And for the PSU, I just bought a very cheap Mars gaming unit, which is not the best power supply, but plenty fine for a PC that draws combined 300 watts under full load. Yes, 300 after the undervolts. So this is how you do it. And now, what's the experience with such a cheap PC on a monitor which some pretty impressive spec, even though nowadays it's cheap price-wise? Well, in Apex Legends, we are literally maxing out the game. However, you may look at it and say, okay, we're doing 300 FPS at 1440p, but actually, if you're fighting, it's gonna drop. So if you're using a 1440p 240Hz panel, you want to capitalize on the smoothness. This thing is extremely smooth. It also has some frame sync tech. And going into the monitor a bit more, this is very good for competitive gaming because you also have an HUD with a crosshair in the middle. You can change the brightness. Like, it's basically the same as a name-branded monitor, except it's from Titan Army, so you're paying a lot less. So it's a very good buy. But you want your PC to do around 300 FPS on average, because in this way you're staying around 240 FPS, which is the magic number to match the refresh rate, even in demanding scenes. And it's actually better if you go ahead and lock your frame rates to match the one of your monitors. So if your monitor is 240 Hz, like this one, I would lock Apex Legends at 240 FPS to match it. Now, Warzone is a lot heavier. So in 1440p, we are not able with a PC like this to reach the 240 Hz target, which we want to do for this monitor. However, we still have a great experience doing over 160 frames. So I'd say it's definitely playable. But if you're playing Call of Duty multiplayer instead of Warzone, then we can finally reach these settings. Now, having a high resolution monitor with a better looking panel, even though it's a bit more demanding to run in 1440p, it means if you're playing single player titles, you're gonna look amazing. And also this panel is still the size which pro players prefer, because it's a 24.5" panel. It's not a 27. So you do get extremely good image clarity, because remember, resolution is always related to size. So if I have a big 4K panel, like a TV, it's gonna look a lot worse than, for example, your phone. If you have, for example, the latest iPhone, which has lower resolution but a lot smaller screen. So by packing 1440p in such a small panel, you're still keeping the competitive edge, because remember, most pro players still play at 24-inch, but you're also getting the visual quality of around a 4K panel at 32 inches. Possibly it's even better here by a little bit. Now, since we got a 4060 for this build, we also have access to all the latest tech, DLSS, frame gen, so we can use these in case we want to play a very demanding title and the GPU isn't quite able to do it at 1440p. But the 4060, surprisingly, if you're looking to play single player titles at maybe 100 FPS, 60 FPS, surprisingly capable. You can play Cyberpunk, no problem, and even all the latest titles easily. So what this means is that with just a little bit over 200 bucks for the monitor and a bit over 500 bucks for the PC, let's call it 800 bucks total, you can get an insanely good gaming setup. One that up until a few years ago would have costed you probably 3 grand between monitor and computer, and it still wouldn't have maxed it out as well as it's doing it today. So I think in mid-2025, we are finally able to move away from 1080p without breaking the bank. And now I know a lot of you guys that watch this channel already are on 1440p, but if you ever tried a monitor like this before, let me know what you guys think. I think the 24-inch with 1440p is a pretty interesting choice. And also let me know what you think about a build like this. It's very similar to my previous one, the meta build for 1080p, but I think it's great for 1440p as well. And with that said, if you watched the video this far, maybe drop a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys again in another video. Bye bye.